4 democracy activists have been executed by Myanmar's military in what is believed to be the first use of capital punishment in decades. Former lawmaker Pheo Ziathao, writer and activist Ko Jimmy, Hliam Myo Ong and Ong Turazao were accused of committing terror act. The executions, which were first announced by the military in June, drew international condemnation. They come in the wake of a 2021 military coup. Now, the junta overthrew the democratically elected government led by Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, NLD, in February last year, sparking huge protests, which were swiftly crushed. Meanwhile, Deputy Asia Director of Human Rights Watch, Phil Robertson, has called for the international community to look to specific intervention into this situation. Joining me now on the news is Executive Director of Lead Network, Chukwuma Okenwa, to discuss more on this issue. Thank you so much for joining me, Chukwuma.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, now talking about the execution in Myanmar, what exactly is your take on the state execution of 4 individuals who were alleged to have carried out terror acts? What do you think about that?
It is condemnable and a minus on some of the gains as long as human rights concerns is with respect to the international community. We know that issue of human rights is universal, and it's a universal declaration that people have right to live, and not to talk about the right of expression. People who has been advocating that since for over 1 year that the military juntas took over Myanmar with all of the oppression, and come to think about it, in uttermost abuse of people's right of expression to decide their leader in an election they describe as rigged. The military took over and has been suppressing citizens. And I see this, an attack on the frontline activists, as one to whittle down the momentum with which people are demanding to have their country back. But guess what? What I really feel that it's really time for the international community to begin to rejig its strategy, as it has to do with, the nations, the countries that has the right to veto. And I'm talking about the P5, the permanent 5. Because what the problem is, I know that before now, the weight of the international community should have come on Myanmar, except for Russia and China, which are part of the P5 and has always shielded Myanmar in terms of the abuses we see all over.
Okay, now, Chukwuma, we know that this case has attracted a lot of international condemnation, but beyond that, isn't there any written constitution, any documented law against the execution of citizens? I mean, human rights law, anything that relates to the rights, like you said, of individuals?
Yeah, certainly we have that in the international community. But of course, there are 2 things to note. Some of the laws are non-binding, right? Some are binding, just like every other laws, even internally within a country. But of course, Universal Declaration of Human Rights is one that all nations are privy to, provided you are recognized by the United Nations. But of course, when there are some infractions, before the international community could take action against its members, you begin to talk about some forms of resolutions being adopted. And we know that the right of the 5 most powerful nations within the UN system, their right to veto decisions has actually been a clog in the wheel in terms of meting out appropriate sanctions. And that's exactly what we've seen. And until some of those things are rejected, we'll still have a world where everybody will keep asking, what is actually the role of the international community in whittling down crisis, in ensuring that uttermost abuse of human rights it's not carried out by nations. So these have actually been the challenge, just like a citing reference of what is happening in Ukraine at the moment. People have asked, why is it that despite having United Nations, this war has continued? It's very simple. All other nations says yes. Let's deal with Russia, right? But of course, you cannot throw in all of the full weight or even send a UN peacekeeping mission if one, all of the P5 does not agree. And that has actually been all of the problems, that is facing the international community. And I think it's really, yes, it's time to really review some of those things.
Okay, thank you for that perspective. Now, Chukwuma, shortly after Aung San Suu Kyi came into power, there has been unrest in Myanmar. And then people have been hopeful that eventually, she will be released and then they'll be back to civilian rule. But this latest executions have just ended the hope of bringing an end to this unrest in the country, according to some critics. And it looks obvious, pretty obvious. Now, do you share the same thought, or do you think that there is still hope for that country?
There is hope, of course, because the most important thing, like an analyst within the country cited, he made it very clear that ordinarily the military junta would have felt from their calculations that this will be able to break the momentum, even the military takeover. But guess what? A rather united people against ethnic lines and divisions, the people became united to fight commonly for their country. And I tell you, as much as the killings and, of course, casualties, which is totaled over 15,000 persons have actually been casualties, either injured or suffered one form of damage or the other, since February last year that this started. But the interesting thing is that the people are not backing off. They are saying, we want our country back. They are saying, we want democracy back. They are saying, let the right thing be done in the right way. Despite all of the intimidations and, unfortunately, the support from two members of the Permanent Five, the people has consistently stood to challenge the military incursions and, of course, a breach on their democracy. And I think with that level of resolution, and with the fact that this is going to be like a wake-up call to the international community to really begin to think of how do we really handle all of this. And I think part of it could be like exploring like some regional diplomacy, to see whether the Myanmar military junta could actually be brought to their knees in terms of doing what is the right thing in Myanmar.
All right, rightly said, Chukwuma. Thank you so much. Executive Director, Lead Network, Chukwuma Okenwa. Thank you so much for your thoughts.